We all know who the best flagship monster is.
No.
Oh. But what about the next flagship monster? Oh yes, hello and welcome my fellow hunters, as today we look to the future and a very exciting possibility that it may hold. I have spoken recently how the Monster Hunter 6 stars are aligning. Tokyo Game Show September announcement, 6 months of pre-release teasing and reveals for a lovely release in March the 20th year, the same month that Monster Hunter 1 came out, and a month that is still part of this fiscal year, in which Capcom still have one last game to release that they think will sell millions. And with all that in place, then, I feel very assured in getting a little bit of theory hype cited when it comes to our Monster Hunter future. And this kind of period between anything announced and everything that we already know being finished is quite an interesting area to exist in, because at this point, everything and anything is possible. And you know, that's kind of fun to just go wild with. Wouldn't this be cool? But I like to temper it with just a little bit of reasoning and logical deductioning. So what am I actually getting to here? Flagship monsters then. What would be the ideal flagship monster for Monster Hunter 6? And I don't mean the literal monster. What would it look like and be called and what element it attacks? That is impossible to predict with nothing to go on. But what type of monster? For example, you know, Rathalos, the flagship of flagships, is a flying wyvern, and there have been 8 flying wyvern flagships. That's a lot of flying wyvern flagships. But what about all the other categories of monster? There are 13 types of monster. Flying wyvern, elder dragon, fanged wyvern, leviathan, brute wyvern, fanged beast, neopteran, temnosaran, bird wyvern, piscine wyvern, carapacian, amphibian, and snake wyvern.
Satsune, Anjanath, Buki Buki, Basilgeese, Lyciana, Tzihu, Delamater, Nibblesnar, Nikarko, Snarkigante, Velhazak, Kirin, Balumu, Xenojiva, Kuliaku, Sora, Magdaros. Gotta hunt 'em all!
There are a few more too, but they don't have large monsters as part of their members. And out of these 13 categories, only 6 have been, well, blessed with a flagship monster member. 8 to the flying wyverns, in Rathalos being the most known. 5 to the elder dragons, in, I would honestly say, Nergigante being the most known, given World's smash hit success status. Fanged wyverns got 2, with Zinogre being their most loved member. Leviathans have 2, with, of course, Legiacrus.
Oh, holy crap, I totally forgot that was even a monster. Is he still a thing? I thought I dreamt that one up. Yeah, he's absolutely my favorite. And which game incarnation of him is your favorite? He's in multiple games. Well, sort of. Man, I can't wait for him to come back again.
2,000 years later.
Still waiting.
Being the one that springs to mind, though I'd say it is very close with Mizutsune, brute wyverns have their pair as well, with Brachydios coming to the fore, though again, Glavenus very, very close. And then finally, Fanged Beast get their Gammoth as their one and only flagship member. Now, you could argue it's generous giving them the other 3 of the Fated 4, but they all do share the flagship status, so technically the Fanged Beasts do get one. But that leaves, as I said, 7 categories of monster that have never been blessed with a flagship. Now, of course, some of them were invented later through the generations, so that gives them less opportunities to get them. But I still think it's a shame it's very heavily focused, let's be honest here, on the flying wyverns and the elder dragons. And I get why. They are the most, well, marketable monsters. They're the coolest monsters. They're the ones that a lot of people lean towards and favor. The least quirky, the most straightforward, look at this badass dragon thing and slap it on the cover, it's gonna sell copies. But I put it to you, you can achieve all of that with one of the types that have just never been given that kind of spotlight. So what are we working with then? Yeah, it's an interesting list, isn't it, when you first look at it? And you can kinda, to be fair to Capcom, see why none of them perhaps got that flagship member, because I think on the surface a lot of them don't come across as kinda game-carrying entities. You gotta remember that in modern era Monster Hunter 5th gen onwards, the flagship has quite the story focus, it has quite the role to play. I mean, even before that with things like Gormagala and the Frenzy arc, but especially now, Magna Malo is a big deal in Rise and the Rampage and the whole plot. Nergigante was. Velcana with the song and that misdirection was. Malzeno, of course, was a huge deal to the whole Curios and everything that mattered in Sunbreak. So if you have a flagship, these days, it needs to do more than just be a cool monster. It needs to work in a multitude of ways and purposes and cutscenes and be something that we're going to care about over the course of an entire game. So when we look at something like amphibians, I feel like that's harder to do. They seem almost designed to be earlier game monsters, and I just can't see a bigger, extremer amphibian being the main deal in a game. And we just got a new amphibian in Tetranadon in Rise and Sunbreak, so they've recently had a much-needed update to their roster. So I think we can eliminate them. Then, Carapacian. Don't get me wrong, I adore the crabs. But can you really see a quirky little jittery crab being the flagship of Monster Hunter 6, which is going to be the biggest Monster Hunter game of all time, if World and Iceborne's trajectory is anything to go by, that will be exposed to the most amount of people, and on the box, the big boy, the main deal, it's a crab. Look, of course you could design the crab monsters in such interesting ways, and you could do more with Carapacians than literally just crabs. You could have like a lobster flagship, but I do think it would prove challenging to make it as appealing as they need it to be, and with both Daimyo and Shogun getting that Sunbreakness, I do think again they have had recent spotlight to eliminate them. Then let's look at the Temnocerans. They are basically just the spiders. Nursilla was the only one until Raknakadaki came along, and while I think you could definitely have a flagship that is spidery in nature, I think a insect is definitely a harder sell, but I think everything we have left is definitely more looking possible in all of the checkboxes that need to get checked. You could do a kind of creepier vibe, a darker nature, maybe something more mysterious, less raw powerful, but a little bit more evasive and has different kind of ways of influencing the story. Or you could have a insect monster that we think is the big bad, and it turns out it's just like a minion of a greater hive of which the actual queen is the surprise twist. It's this Elder Dragon all along that they have done in every 5th gen game, and that would be genuinely fun. So I do give the Temnocerans, and by extension the Neopterans, who are just all of the other bugs like Celtus Queen and such, that kinda nod, and I do put them both as sort of 4th and 5th most likely. And if it wasn't for Raknakadaki getting these spiders a bit more attention in Sunbreak, I'd probably have them even higher. And everything I pretty much just said applies to the Neopterans too. They have not had a new member in the 5th gen, and I think it will be a crime if the 6th gen doesn't give us some new insects, but I could see it being a real expanded category there, as opposed to just, hey, here's a single flagship and then we're done. I think you need a larger roster of bugs, because by their nature, there's lots of them. So if we let those go, we're down to the Piscine wyverns, the Plesiophs, the bird wyverns like the Ankut Ku, and the snake wyverns like the only snake wyvern, Najarala. Though Dalamadur is still totally a snake wyvern, it just happens to be also an elder dragon, so that's what he's known as. And these three, I think, are very competitive. Bird wyvern, I think, struggles the most next, as while you have ones like Yangaruga that are absolute badasses, they're powerful, they're threatening, they're a bit scary, and could totally have filled, I think, a like first or second gen flagship spot, I don't think they quite work for what the flagships have evolved to be. They're very involved now, they're elaborately designed, they've got loads of moves, and there's a lot going to them. And I think by the very nature of the bird wyverns, they're a little bit more simple. Probably Malfestio's the more complex one, and yes, he's the best one, but I think he's definitely an outlier. Though he does kind of make me think a bird wyvern flagship, you know, a classic sort of eagerly, owly shape like he is, as opposed to the half-scaly Yankutkus or the drones, would be really neat. A massive, soaring, swooping creature that's causing issues from high above, and how do you get to him? Maybe he could nest in a really obscure, far-to-reach place, and getting there and encountering everything along the way to get to it is a bulk of the story and how you encounter new monsters, and then you could find out, you know, the plot twist Elder Dragon up there is actually the reason why the giant bird is nesting where instead of where it should be, and so on and so forth. And that would be very interesting. I think giving a bird the spotlight after the bird wyverns being such a classic backbone of Monster Hunter, I mean, most people's first hunt was against a bird wyvern. I mean, maybe not so anymore with World Success and Great Jagras being there, but I could definitely see them both deserve it, and you could definitely do a unique monster that happens to be a bird wyvern to give them that flagship member. But I do have them in third place, and then I'm going to eliminate the Piscine wyverns. Simply because while I think you could do an incredible flagship job with them, which is why they're second, I think they're fitting, I think they could have one, I think you could redemption arc their otherwise, let's say, mixed feelings in the general community members. You're not going to do a Piscine flagship until you have another watery focused game. So if Monster Hunter 6 does bring back water as a focus in any way, then yeah, Piscines go right to the second spot on my list. But for now, they are superseded by essentially the inspiration for this entire video, which is the following sentence: we need a snake wyvern flagship monster. I mean, we need more snake wyverns in general, because they're amazing. That snaky feel is unlike anything else. The coiling, the speed, the size of Najarala, and you can get so creative with them. The amount of different snakes in all shapes and sizes in the world, I mean, just look at the bloody dragon snake. Is this thing not the coolest thing you've ever seen? It's literally a dragon, but a snake. Anyway, I want a snake wyvern flagship. You could definitely make one threatening, you could make it interesting, you could give it a complex moveset, you could make it story relevant, because the snake wyverns, you could have them water-based, you could have them land, you could put them in caves, you could put them high up in trees, you could even somehow invent a flying snake, and it would work, because they're a very adaptable, moldable, both reptile and body shape, to form this central monster. They have the cool factor that sells, they have the intimidation factor, they're interesting and easily made mysterious. I mean, just look at Dalamadur and his whole shtick. Yes, an elder dragon, but clearly a snake wyvern still, and that would translate super well into a flagship. You could even have a flagship like Seregios, where there's lots of them everywhere all of a sudden, but in snake form, where they're hatching and they're everywhere, pouring up out the ground, and we're like, what's going on? And that forms one of the narrative threads, and you kind of get where I'm going with this. I think a snake wyvern ticks all the boxes and is a justifiable monster to make a more endgame Apex, almost Elder Dragon level threat, like something Magnamalo was. And ultimately, I just think it would be utterly perfect, and at the stage where we know literally nothing and can just throw our fanciful wants into the air, I put my, wishes upon the back of a as of yet unconfirmed and maybe not even existing snake wyvern flagship. I think they are the most deserving of every category too, as one of the coolest categories of wyvern, but the least represented, and it's been, well, it's not been a while, I guess it was 4th gen, but I do think they would benefit hugely from the improvements that World and Iceborne have made, especially just visually. What a gorgeous creature it would be. So that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Which type of wyvern would you make the Monster Hunter 6 flagship if you had the power to choose such? And let me know down below. But now then, until we meet again, like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of this channel on Patreon down below. Goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.